Guys, there is no place that I would rather be than right here with you right now in this hallowed place where we all get to come together to celebrate us, the fans, and all things DC. And I've got to pinch myself right now to make sure I'm not dreaming, because we have the man who is starring in the next feature film incarnation of one of DC's most popular characters of all time. We're talking more than 80 years here, guys. So ready your bodies, because here is the Batman, Robert Pattinson.
As many of you probably already know, we were in the beginning stages of production when COVID hit, so now I'm very anxious to get back to work and continue to form this beloved character. I've always been a massive fan. I'm not really allowed to share anything, so I'm going to hand it over to the great Matt Reeves, somewhere around here, and he can determine what can and can't be talked about. But I do know that if you stick around till the end, there's a cool surprise, so I hope you enjoy.
Matt, I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, as Robert said, it's super early to tell us much about the movie, but I think what's exciting about where we are with DC and with this franchise specifically is that there's been a multiverse of Batman, right? And now you're taking over this particular iteration of Batman. What made you want to tell a Batman story? I mean, this is a heavy lift. What was it that drew you to this character in this world?
Look, I love Batman, and I've loved Batman since I was a kid. And I never even imagined, when I began making movies, that I would do genre movies, because I just loved certain kinds of movies that were very character based. And it's really interesting that as I got deeper into genre, I realized that that was a way to do very emotional stories, but under the guise of these sort of great mythic tales. And in particular, what excited me, and the thing I related to in the Batman story, was that he isn't a superhero in the traditional sense. He might have a cape, but he can't fly. He's like you and me, but if he has a superpower, it's the ability to endure. And not only the ability, but the kind of compulsion. And so that idea of being that driven by your past and by the things that you can't quite resolve in yourself, like, he's a very alive character. And to me, to tell a version of Batman where, again, it wasn't about how he became Batman, but it's about the early days of how he is Batman, and he is so far from being perfect, and watch us sort of see him becoming what we all know about him and see it in new ways. I felt like that was a way to do something that hadn't been done, and that was really what I was excited to be able to do in this iteration.
You have said that all of us imagine ourselves, or have imagined ourselves to be Batman. And I know that's why I love those stories from the time I was a kid, because he didn't come from another planet, right? He doesn't have magical powers. He's just a guy that wants to do good.
And that's the thing. The other question is, what is good? One of the things that I think is interesting is learning how to be Batman. The whole idea, this is all an experiment in the movie. The idea is that we're in year 2. It's the Gotham experiment. It's a criminological experiment. He's trying to figure out sort of what he can do that can finally change this place. And in our story, as he's in that mode, that's where you meet him, and you see that he is charting what he's doing, and he's seeing that he's not having any of the effect that he wants to have yet. And that is when the murders start to happen, and then the murders begin to describe sort of the history of Gotham in a way that only reinforces what he knows about Gotham, but it opens up a whole new world of corruption that went much farther. But as that story starts to come out, without being an origin tale for him, it ends up being something that touches on his origins. So you start to see that as it starts to describe this epic history of corruption in Gotham, that you start to understand, well, where did my family sit in that? And in that sense, I think all of that is is a way to take a story that is a detective story, a very point of view story, a mystery. It's got, of course, action, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of it, it also is incredibly personal for him, even though it is the story in which he's trying to understand and unravel this mystery.
It's so layered. I'm really excited about it. Speaking of what we know about Gotham, you've revealed some of the characters in this story, and the casting is just extraordinary.
They're amazing. I mean, we have, Paul Dano plays a version of the Riddler that no one has ever seen before, and it's really exciting. He's such an incredibly creative actor, and so what he is doing, I think, is going to blow people's minds. And then to have, Zoe Kravitz, her iteration of Selina Kyle, like, to me, that's incredibly exciting. You have an iteration that you've never seen of what she's doing, but it touches on all these kind of iconic sort of things that people know from the comics. So it's always about trying to square what you sort of know with what also is new. And that is really part of, I think, the exciting sort of process of making a Batman movie, which is to find a way to make it your own and to find a way for the actors to make it their own, and yet still connect to all these things that people also go, oh, that's my Selina. I know who that is. And I guess the one thing about the Rogues Gallery is that it actually, in a weird way, is the origins of a lot of our Rogues Gallery characters. So, like, Selina isn't Catwoman yet. That's actually part of the journey. Oz is not yet the Kingpin that he's going to become. He's the Penguin, and in fact, doesn't like being called the Penguin. And the Riddler is just emerging for the first time. So that's all incredibly exciting. And then we have, like, to have Andy Serkis, who is, I work with on the Apes movies, is one of the most beautiful actors, and he is playing an iteration of Alfred that I feel like people have never seen before, which is really exciting to share with people. And then we have an incredible, for me, like, I just think that Jeffrey Wright is just one of the great actors, and to be able to work with him in a totally new iteration of Gordon. And then we have, the amazing John Turturro, who's going to be a Carmine Falcone, who, again, I think in this iteration, you've never seen that version before. And how all these characters connect, I think, for me, was one of the challenges, but also exciting things about the creation of the story, which is that in going on this sort of desire to solve, or the urge and the compulsion to solve this series of crimes, you touch on all of these iterations of the beginnings of these characters, so that the whole movie is like, it's like a snowball rolling. You can just feel the momentum building and building, and that's the attempt.
It's exciting to be able to talk to you in the middle of making this, this incredibly rich undertaking. And you're an incredibly busy man, not just this film. It's just announced that you're going to be working on the Gotham PD series you're developing with writer Terrence Winter. How are these two projects going to dovetail? How are the series and the film's worlds going to overlap or connect?
Yeah, totally. I mean, for me, the idea of this story was a story in which Gotham, which has this sort of depth of corruption, and then the idea that we could actually do a series that is going deeper into an aspect of it, which in this case is the corrupt police department, the corrupt inner workings of the city, and the way we're going to do the series, which is, I'm incredible. Terrence Winter is just like an incredible writer. So the idea that we got him to do this, just is literally a dream. And the idea is we go back to year one, and year one is the beginning of the emergence. It's the first appearance of this masked vigilante that starts to unsettle the city, and you start to see the story through the point of view of these corrupt cops, and one in particular, and the story is actually a battle for his soul. And he's a cop over generations, and the history of corruption in Gotham is enormous and goes back many years. And the story is like, as you realize that there's this myth building in the background, you're actually in a new place where you've never seen these characters before, some of which we'll touch on that you may have seen from the comics, but others totally new. Then you can go down an avenue and go into detail that you couldn't do in a movie, and to go into these sort of rich places and meet entirely new characters that Terrence is going to create. I'm incredibly excited about it.
That's awesome. I mean, like I said, it just dimensionalizes that multiverse that much more and adds that much more depth to it. Now, as you know, Matt, here in the DC fandom, it's not just a celebration of all the superheroes and the villains that we love, but most importantly, it's a celebration of the fans. So we have some questions for you straight from the fan verse, okay?
Okay, cool.
Here we go. All right, this question comes from Arvin in the UAE, and he asks, when it comes to costume design and the collaboration processes behind it, to what extent were stars able to implement their own influence within the design?
That's a good question. You know, actually quite a bit. I mean, we have, of course, an incredible costume designer, Jacqueline Duran, and the bat suit was designed by Glyn Dillon, and they're geniuses. I mean, it's great to work with them, but one of the things that's really important is being able to work with the actors. Like Rob had a very important part in designing the suit in that he had to be able to wear it, he had to be able to fight in it. And one of the things about this bat suit is that it's very practical. The whole idea is that he's made it himself. And so we needed to be able to sort of see how it would fit on him in these ways that he could move, but also looked like it was something that was still evolving. And even the idea of the story, he's in year 2, so he's been wearing it. So like, he goes every night looking for trouble. So you look at his cowl and you can actually see there are gashes in it. And all of that detail was an incredibly exciting sort of dialogue between me and the costume designers and then having Rob involved. And so, yeah, I mean, the actors have a lot to do because you always do a dialogue with everyone so that we can arrive at the thing that feels the most grounded, the most honest, and the most character-based.
I'm just hoping everybody got pockets.
You know what, too? I will tell you this. One of the big things that Rob actually talked to Christian Bale, and Christian Bale was like, just make sure you're going to be able to relieve yourself. So all of that sort of was actually part of what was important to build into, which is like, okay, he needs to be able to put it on. He also needs to be able to live as a human being.
Okay, here's a video question from Pedro in Brazil.
Hi, I'm Pedro from Brazil, and I believe that one of the most important things about the whole Batman mythology is not just the characters such as Batman or the Joker, it's Gotham City itself. So I wanted to ask you, what should we fans expect to see from Gotham City in this film? Thank you.
You're absolutely right. Like, it's just as important as any of the Rogues Gallery. It's sort of like the nature of what this place is and the history of it is critically important to our story. And one of the things that I really wanted to do, because it is the center of this story, especially the history of corruption in the city, was I wanted to present it in a way that was really fleshed out. I wanted it to feel like an American city you'd never been to. I mean, other iterations have, you know, obviously the Burton one had very, very theatrical, beautiful, beautiful sets. And Nolan had the version that he created in Batman Begins, and that was a particular thing, and then parts of Chicago and parts of Pittsburgh. And what we're trying to do is create a version of it that you haven't seen before. So some of the locations that we've chosen, the idea is to take, let's say there's like we have like a Gotham Square. So that's like Times Square, right? Now, if we shot it in Times Square, then you'd be like, oh, I guess Gotham is New York. But in our case, it's actually going to be Liverpool. And the idea is to go to Liverpool where there's all the sort of the foundation of the Gothic architecture and then add all of the more modern structures through CG, but in a way that you're going to, when you see the movie, now that I've blown it, of course I've told you what it is, but you'll be like, hey, where's that city? Where did they shoot? And so the aspect of Gotham and realizing it has been, for me, one of the great pleasures in getting to mount the movie.
That's amazing. Evla from Germany says, it's already known that the movie is going to explore Bruce's second year as Batman. How do the citizens of Gotham perceive the vigilante?
Oh, that's a good question. Because it's still early and because he is a vigilante, which means he takes the law into his own hands. I mean, if you were in a city and there was a guy who dressed up as a bat and showed up out of the shadows and sometimes confronted those people and beat them up because he felt what they were doing was wrong so that he could sort of put the fear of God in them about the crimes that they're committing, I think we would wonder, well, gee, that guy sounds a little dangerous. He's not yet the vision of the character that he becomes, where he becomes a symbol of hope for the city. He's earlier in the trajectory, and so they're afraid of him, frankly. He's kind of a growing legend. I think there are some people who are wondering, does he exist? How exactly does he exist? And that legend is building day by day and has been since he made his first appearance about a year and a half ago as we were in year 2. So yeah, the public is afraid of him. I mean, that's one of the things I think that he will confront in the course of the story and that Rob has to sort of deal with in playing the character, which is the idea of how he's perceived.
And speaking of Rob, Aditya in Indonesia has a video question.
What was the best part of Robert Pattinson that he was chosen as the new Batman?
I mean, the thing about Robert Pattinson is he's an incredible actor. I feel like the work that he's done in the last, I don't know, 6 years has been incredible. Like a friend of mine made a movie called Lost City of Z, and Rob appeared in that movie, and I was like, who is that guy? He had just such charisma, and Rob in the movie has this incredible beard, and you're like, who is that? and it's Rob. And Rob in The Rover, and Rob in Good Time. He is like a chameleon, and he's just such a gifted actor, and he's been working on his craft in this really incredible way. And he also happens to be a tremendous, passionate sort of fan of Batman the way that I am. And so it was an incredible thing to be able to connect with him and to share our excitement about the character and to work with him. I mean, you know, he looks like Batman, but more than anything, he has the soul of someone, I think, that can play a Batman like you've never seen before.
Andy from Australia asks, how long did it take to build the Batsuit, Batmobile, and Batbike? And did you have to build a set to create the Batcave?
You know, it's funny. It's like stepping into your childhood in a certain way, because, you know, obviously the first thing you have to do is you have to craft a story that you think is worthy of the character. But then once you've done that and it becomes like, oh yeah, we're making this movie, one of the things you have to do is you have to design a Batsuit. You have to design a Batmobile. You have to have a Batcave. You have to have Batbikes, all of the things that he's going to have. And so, you know, for me, that's been one of the exciting things, and that happened even before we were quite done with the last iteration of the script. You know, we'd already gone through passes, and it was quite clear what the vision of the world was being. While I'm writing, I actually already have a production designer on, and so he would be sending, as I'm writing scenes, I might send stuff to James, and he's like, oh, well, what about this for a Batcave? And so, yes, we had to build a set for it. But I think it's an incredibly original and different set. I think it's going to be really fun for the audience to discover what version of exactly this Batcave is going to be. The Batmobile and the Batsuit, they took a long time. You know, I mean, Glenn came on quite early, and we worked in the designing of it, again, as I was writing, and the idea of him being able to fight in it. And so they started illustrating, and I'd say we spent easily a year to do the Batsuit and then to get into the Batmobile. And that, of course, that part's a dream. I mean, you know, the idea of getting to do your own version of the Batmobile is like, you're just kind of like, what? That's the incredible candy, right? Like the telling of a story is the hard work and trying to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And then when you get to dive into the idea of this car that, again, feels connected to this version of the character, a grounded version of the character, this is something that he built, and to try and look at those kind of rough seams and imagine how all that works, it's been an incredible sort of gift to be able to do that.
So much fun. Alejo from Argentina asks, what will be the main difference between this Batman and the other incarnations from previous films?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think, you know, as we said, it's not an origin tale, and you're meeting him in the early days. And for me, what's really important about this iteration is that, you know, a lot of the other stories are very much about how he had to master his fear and master himself in order to become Batman, and that in that Batman state, he's sort of in his best self. And I think for me, what was exciting was not doing that, not doing the origin, not doing what we'd seen done so beautifully in other movies, but instead to meet him in the middle of this criminological experiment, to see him in the becoming of Batman, and to see him make mistakes as Batman, and to see him grow and fail and be heroic, do all of the things that we associate with Batman, but in a way that felt very human and very flawed. The biggest fantasy, of course, as a kid would have been to be Batman. And so the idea of putting the audience in the shoes of that character and make the audience feel the way that he feels, I think that, to me, I hope is what's different about what we're doing, is to try and do it in exactly that sort of manner. And then, of course, the other things that are from the earlier history of the comics, like him being the world's greatest detective and how he got there, you know, those things have been touched on, but I don't know that they've been as central to the plot as they are in this particular Batman. So there's a lot of things I hope that will be totally different.
Cliff from Australia asks, what's one deep cut comic fans might be surprised to see has inspired the Batman?
You know, for me, because I wanted to get into the mindset of the character and I wanted to think of the psychology, for me, I think one of the cool deep dive ones was Darwin Cook's ego. He's confronting the beast that is Batman, and it's kind of, there's a kind of duality. I mean, there's a lot in what, you know, I was trying to do in the story about him confronting the shadow side of himself. The degree to which you have self-knowledge, you're able to understand your motivations, but he's broken, Batman. So while he's doing all of these things for the reasons that he thinks is right and that have a heroic sort of grounding in them, there's also many things that are driven by the parts of himself he doesn't yet know. And so I would say that that kind of sort of psychological Jungian shadow side, that sort of version of it is very much connected to that vision from Darwin Cook, from Ego.
Yosef from Bolivia says, which non-Batman movie were Matt Reeves, yours, inspiration for the Batman?
Oh, well, because the movie is a detective story, because it is a thriller in the sort of cop world, and because it's about corruption, we're treating this Batman story as if this could have happened. I mean, the idea is that, as I said, Batman doesn't have this sort of the ability to have sort of superheroic powers. He just has superheroic focus and superheroic drive. And so, for me, a lot of movies like Chinatown was a key one, because Chinatown, Jake Gittes, in investigating that sort of the series of crimes that were part of that story, he discovers the depth of corruption in Los Angeles. And so in that way, it's like a classic noir. And that's very much the series of murders that Batman is investigating are very much in that mode. So Chinatown was a really big one. And that idea of that kind of gritty, flawed, this humanity of it, that was very much inspired by those kinds of movies, by like French Connection and other sort of cop movies like that. I would say even a movie like Taxi Driver, the description of a place and very much getting inside of somebody's head. And I guess a lot of really sort of 70s street grounded stories.
So, Matt, one of the exciting things about the Batman as a character is that he's so layered and so kind of intense that you can dip into his life at different points, and none of these different characters, these different iterations of the Batman or Gotham or the entire kind of Batman universe as it was, will tread on the ground that others have already covered.
Oh, totally. I mean, for me, that's exciting. Like the idea of the history of Batman, like just the idea of the actors who have played Batman, like Adam West, when I was a kid, like Adam West, that was like, when I was 5 and watching him as Batman, like that blew my mind. I wanted to be Batman so badly. And then I remember when I was a little bit older and then Keaton came onto the scene with the Burton movie, I was so excited they were going to do a theatrical version of that. And then the iterations that have followed, like so many incredible people. I mean, Bale was amazing. I mean, incredible. Everything that Chris Nolan was astonishing. And I personally, I loved Ben Affleck as Batman. I thought he was incredible. Like an iteration again that we hadn't seen. So like, in fact, I'm really excited because I know that they've got, Zach is going to be doing the new Justice League cut of his that he didn't get to do originally, and now he's getting to do it, and I can't wait to see that. So for me, the idea that there are sort of, first of all, to be a part of history like that is an incredible thing, and I do think that that's one of the things. It's kind of like the comics, when you look at the comics, there are so many iterations of Batmans, there are so many different people's Batmans. There's Neil Adams' Batman, there's, of course, there's Bob Kane and Bill Finger's Batman, and there's Frank Miller's Batman. There's so many Batmans, and so to me, that's one of the joys of being in the kind of comic book world, is to try and say, hey, what can we do to put our spin on this so that people can find a new way of looking at that character that they love?
I remember when the Dark Knight graphic novels came out when I was a kid, what a radical departure that felt like, how exciting that was.
Oh my God.
But it didn't erase all the ways that I had connected with that character previously. It just made the world richer and, more exciting. So.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, it's the strange thing of wanting to be able to find a way to come at it in some new way, and yet it has to be connected to that thing that you love. And that, for me, being part of that history and being part of all of that is sort of almost unbelievable. You have to pinch yourself.
So, Matt, before we wrap up, I think that what the fans really want is to get just even a tiny glimpse of what the film is going to look like. And, this is a fan experience. I'm hoping you brought us something we can show them.
It's fandom. And, having been to Comic-Con and all of that, you don't come without anything. And, look, we've only shot 25% of the movie, 30% of the movie, so there's so much. This is just scratching the surface, but there was no way that I could come here and not bring a look at the movie. So, yeah, I'm incredibly excited to share what is just the first tease of our movie, and I hope you guys like it.
Your secret friend.
Underneath the bridge.
Who?
Top of Nirvana. And the animals I've trapped.
Haven't a clue.
All become my pet.
Let's play a game, just me and you. Any of this mean anything to you?
You're becoming quite a celebrity. Why is he writing to you?
If you are justice, please do not lie. What is the price for your blind eye?
The hell are you supposed to be?
I'm vengeance.
Whoa! This guy's crazy!
You're part of this too.
How am I part of it?
You'll see.
I'm so excited for this film. It's amazing that you only shot, a quarter of it, and it's already feels so robust and intricate, and I can't wait to see the finished product. Thank you so much for being here with me and with all the fans around the world who are so excited for this film. I know I speak for them when I say that we are all super pumped for The Batman.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here, and I'm really excited that we're going to get back to making this movie so that you guys can see it.
Guys, a huge thank you to the fans around the world for your dedication to DC and honestly for being the inspiration behind the whole DC fandom itself. We literally would not be here if it wasn't for you.